Apparently, there is only one happiness in life, and that is to love and be loved. Maybe I'd probably add wine to that list as well. Just saying. Anyway, hi, I'm Kelvin, guest of Guest Wines, and welcome to our Wine and Dine at Home with Colin's Fine Food. Colin's Fine Food have prepared 3 delicious dishes for you, and we have selected 3 marvellous wines once again that not only work a treat on their own, but with the dishes before you. So before we go any further, can I just check that we have the following wines? The Valentines Classic Cava Rosado, the Santa Maure Beaujolais, and the Quinta de Portal Tawny Port. Brilliant. Okay, so we've got some fantastic dishes lined up for you here. These are to go alongside, and what a treat Colin's Fine Food have done for us on this occasion. Because we have, for starters, a choice of coarse pork and ham terrine, or king prawns and mango salsa, or double baked goat's cheese pudding. For mains, we have roast up breast and passion fruit in a whiskey sauce, or chalk stream trout fillet in tomato butter, or sheared fillet of beef in sauce Diane with handmade oven chips, or mushroom millefeuille. Fantastic. And that's not it. There's even more. There's a choice of puds as well. And for puds, we have Yorkshire ginger and rhubarb custard tart, or chocolate fondant pudding with salted caramel cheese, or white chocolate panna cotta and berry compote. Whew, I feel I'm already getting hot under the collar. Ooh, steamy. Right, I think we should drink some wine, don't you? What we're going to do, how we're going to do this is like in all the other wine and dines. I'm going to talk a little bit about the wine, maybe a bit about the producer, where it's come from and how it's made, and then what it tastes like. And we're going to do a little bit of wine tasting. Now, wine tasting is just that slightly different from just wine drinking. Where wine drinking, you fill your glass, you drink it down, jobs are good, and it's all done. Here, we're just going to stop, pause, and just pay a little bit more attention to what it is we're actually experiencing in the glass by itself, and then with the actual food. Now, we've got 3 nice wines here for you to try. And with the first one we're going to try is the Valentines, which is a pink cava, which I have here. And I'm going to try and open it now without it going everywhere. Obviously, if you're a Formula 1 driver, you want to be able to shake this up and make it go everywhere except in your glass and in your mouth. But this evening, we want to make sure that we actually drink all of this lovely fizz that we have before. So I'm going to just gently, what you do is you unfasten the cage like this, but you keep it secure with your hands, and you hold on to the cork, but you don't turn the cork. What you're doing is you grip the bottom and you start to turn the bottom of the bottle instead. You've got to give it a little bit of a push around, but slowly work it, keep a good grip on the top of the bottle, and then as it comes out, it should come out, I hope, with fantastic, a little sigh. The technical name for that is an angel's fart, by the way. So there you go. That's your first technical tip of this evening. And one thing about sparkling wine is sometimes it can be a bit lively, depending on if it's not chilled down enough or it's been on a bit of a bumpy ride before you opened it. Excuse me. So the best thing to do is just to have it tilted slightly at an angle. If it does start to all pour out, then the best thing to do is just keep tilting it at an angle, and it will stop. If you keep it upright, it will pour out and it will continue, and you'll lose about half the bottle. So I've chosen a flute glass, being a bit traditionalist. You don't have to have a flute glass. It's just nice because it does tend to capture the bubbles. And for yourself, so you're going to fill this up. I'm just going to fill it a little bit because I want to do a tasting, and also with a tasting, it's also nice just to be able to get some oxygen in there. So this releases some of the aromas that we're going to get. And as you can see, it's got a nice mousse to it. It's wonderful. It's had a nice mousse to develop, and it's just started to go down. One of the bubbles are still interacting in the glass itself. Incidentally, the bubbles are referred to as beads, and the frothy bit on top is referred to as the mousse. This has got a lovely pink colour. It is made from two red grape varieties, which is Garnacha, otherwise known as Grenache, and Monastrell, also known as Mourvedre. These are excellent red wine grapes and make some fantastic red wines, but here we have got them as a rosé. How they make the rosé is to get the grapes and they just gently crush the grapes themselves, so it just releases enough colour and flavour from the actual skins to make into the wine. Now, there's different ways to make a sparkling wine, and some of the main ways is, one, you can just get a still wine and you then inject it with CO2 gas and you've got a nice fizzy wine. Or, much like Prosecco, you can then make a still wine in tank, and then under pressure in the tank, you then re-ferment it. You add some yeast and some other solution in there, and it re-ferments in the actual tank itself, and then you catch the CO2 gas in there, and then you bottle it under pressure straight from the tank. These tend to be lovely, fresh, fruity wines, which on the main, that's kind of what Prosecco is all about. But with the likes of Cava, it's made in the same way as champagne. And what they do here is you make your still wine, but then you then transfer the wine into bottle, and it's in the bottle that then you put the yeast solution and you allow it to re-ferment in the actual bottle itself. This is referred to as the traditional method. And what they're trying to achieve here is they leave it for a time with this yeast. This yeast then is converting the sugar into alcohol, but it's also giving off CO2 gas, which is then trapped under pressure in the bottle. And then after it's finished its alcoholic fermentation, it's left in the bottle, and this is referred to as the lees. And the longer you leave the wine in contact with its lees, it starts to impart these other flavours like nuttiness or baked pastries, or like sort of a bready toastiness into the wine. Champagne is generally left a lot longer than Cava on its lees, but still they can have these similar characteristics about them. There's different grape varieties that are involved in Cava than there is to Champagne, but what they're trying to achieve at the end of it is this lovely fruit, this wine that's not all about the fruits, but it's got these sort of secondary characteristics, these sort of like nuances of pastries, maybe a little bit of herb in there as well, and some other savoury notes that can come out with time. With this particular rosé, it's been left on the lees less than a champagne, about 9 months, and with it, it's just left a little bit of that sort of pastry edge to it, but not a great deal, because here what they wanted to present is the fruits. They wanted to get those lovely fruits. You get some nice summer fruits here, where you get raspberries. There's definitely some nice strawberry going on here. And I just got a little hint of cherry. And then there's this wonderful acidity that comes through. And the acidity is the bit that makes your mouth watery, so it's nice and fresh. And it kind of cleans your palate so that you're ready for another mouthful if you're actually having food with it. But this would be a great aperitif by itself as well. Now, this has come from Spain. That's where Cava is made. So where Champagne is made in France, in the Champagne region. This is made in Spain. And now Spain doesn't have a particular region as such for Cava, but its main region generally is Penedès, which is in the north east of the country. And Cava is an underrated sparkling wine. It's fantastic, and it's also fantastic value because it's so much cheaper than Champagne, but the quality of it is excellent. And here we've got this lovely fruit-driven sparkling wine that's perfect by itself, but also to go with food. Now, just to tell you a little bit about what I think this is like with the actual food itself. So I've said how it is on its own. I think as an aperitif, this is just wonderful. It's fresh, it's friendly, it's great for a get-together. But for tonight, for this special occasion that we're all on together, I think the delicate fruits here give a pleasing additional touch to the dishes without being intrusive. The lightness and freshness enable the palate to be refreshed for the next glorious mouthful, whereas the actual bubbles, they provide an extra dimension of textural sensuality, providing the first spark towards passion and delight. Now then, I'm going to have another drink of this. Oh, very much so. This is excellent, excellent. And I'm hoping you're enjoying it as well. So moving on, we're going to move on to red now. This is red, and the red wine is our Beaujolais, and it's Saint-Amour. And obviously it was picked for an occasion like today. Now, this wine itself is from the Beaujolais region of France. Well, I've got a nice glass of it here. And this area is just below a very famous area called Burgundy. Burgundy is known for its top-notch red and white wines made from Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. But here in Beaujolais, the grape variety is a variety called Gamay. And Beaujolais was made famous in the 1970s with Beaujolais Nouveau. And that was all about picking and making the wine as quick as possible and then getting it to market. And it was a big trend at one bit and very popular. And then it fell out of fashion like lots of things do. And it left, I suppose, Beaujolais with a bit of an old type of old school image of a thing that people no longer wanted anymore. But Beaujolais has always made fantastic wines. It hasn't always just made Nouveau. Nouveau was a marketing gimmick to get people to buy other wines coming from that region, and such as this. Now, Saint-Amour is a sub-region. It's one of their crus, which is saying it's one of their top areas for making their wines from Gamay. And the way they make the wines here, so it's red. So like we mentioned with the sparkling wine, there were red grapes in there, and they were just gently pressed in order to get the colour and some of the flavours out of the skins, because that's where the colour lies, actually, in the skins. So here, this wine, though, has had some special treatment to it in a way that I would maybe call it like it's two fermentations rather than just a single fermentation. A bit like the sparkling wine, but in a different manner. Whereas the sparkling wine, we talked about it having been made as a still wine first, and then it's re-fermented in bottle to make the sparkling wine. Well, this wine has had two fermentations in the tank, but it's not to make it a sparkling wine. It's to make it a fruitier wine, a wine that is easy to drink from day one, and it's just. But it also goes perfectly fine with food as well. And how they do this, it's called a semi-carbonic maceration, which is a bit of a mouthful. Nowadays, it's often referred to as whole bunch. When people mention whole bunch, it's referring to this method. And what you're doing is that the winemaker is picking the grapes, and they don't want them crushed or squashed in any kind of way. They want to leave them whole. And this is either the grapes or they keep them whole on the bunches themselves, and they pop them in tank, and then they seal this tank. And because all these grapes is such a weight of them, the weight of them makes the bottom half of the tank, or the bottom part of the tank, it crushes the grapes down there to squeeze the juice out. And by doing so, it starts off an ordinary yeast fermentation because there's yeast already existing on the actual skins of the grapes. And by doing so, the yeast starts to convert some of the sugar into alcohol. But another byproduct is the CO2 gas, a bit like what we've got in the sparkling wine. But rather than making a sparkling wine with the CO2 gas, what they're doing is it starts to cover the whole tank, and then it blocks out oxygen. And by blocking out oxygen, it prevents the yeast from continuing with their fermentation. But what it does start is as another kind of fermentation, which is called an intracellular fermentation. And here now, under pressure, actually from inside the grapes, they start to ferment without the yeast. And this creates wines that tend to be lighter in colour, fruitier, smoother, and just easier to drink. They're very, very, very pleasurable. And what happens after time, so it starts to this intracellular fermentation is happening, it's bubbling away, and then it gets to a point where it can only make a small amount of alcohol. So it would be a pretty lightly alcohol ABV wine if you just allowed this process in itself. So what happens there is then after a while the winemaker will then open the seal and allow oxygen to get in there, and then because the grapes are getting in, because they're going through this intercellular fermentation, they're beginning to fall in on themselves, they're beginning to collapse, they're beginning to get crushed, the juices start to run out, then the yeast fermentation then continues. This brings the alcohol up, it brings in different nuances and flavors back into the wine, and then it's bottled. Sometimes you can see a little bit of oak, but generally they can be bottled as nice fruity wines. And this is what we have here. This is a family-run operation in the Beaujolais, been going for many years, and I think this works really well with the dishes, all the dishes that were presented, which there were a few. I think Collins Fine Food have really set us up for a treat this evening. So I think, okay, lovers, this is really the wine of love, and scented for it too. The combo here shall have you lustfully staring into each other's eyes with a longing adoration for how good this pairing is with the wine and the food. They simply seem to be meant for one another. A perfect marriage, with each bringing into the relationship something special that when combined makes the earth move. I think I better have a little swig of this one. Here, well, cherry, Kirsch cherry, underlying raspberry, some blackberries going on in there. It's got this nice acidity, this nice freshness. It coats around your mouth, and there's just a little bit of tannin there. Tannin is the dryness that you get in red wines, but because it's gone through this process, the tannins are a little bit tamer, but they're like this nice, finely grained tannins that give that nice dryness, but work perfectly with food. That's what they're kind of made to go with. I think it's got a wonderful aromatic. There's some floral essence in there, maybe a bit of violet or rose underneath the waves of this lovely ripe red fruit. So I'm just going to have another taste. It's so fresh. This is really fresh, and this, you need that freshness because this will help with the food, because it'll help to cut through any fattiness, any greasiness within that food, and it just cleanses your palate for the next mouthful. It also, these fruits will enhance the actual dishes themselves, so we'll go there. It is a bit like, I suppose, a bit of condiment or a sauce that goes with the dish. That is really wonderful. That's really nice. Beaujolais is one of those wines where if it was summer, you can have it outside in the garden, have it so a little bit chilled. There's nothing wrong with chilling red wine. The only time I wouldn't chill a red wine is if it's a full-bodied monster and it's got loads of oak to it and plenty of tannin, because then what will happen is if you chill it, it just accentuates those dry elements, the sort of oakiness and the tannins, and it will taste a bit like when you leave a cold cup of tea on the side. You know, the tea gets cold, it stews a little bit, and then you take a swig of it and you just get that dry tannin feeling. And that's a bit like what can happen if you chill a big red wine, whereas a lot of red wines are not like that. They're fairly light, the tannins are fairly soft and easy going. You can chill them down a little bit, and Beaujolais is perfect for doing that. It's a perfect summer wine as well. I also like it because you can drink it on your own, because I do like a red wine where I can sit on the sofa, I can get on something on the telly that I want to watch, and I can drink it with not really a fuss of needing to have necessarily any food with it. But then when you do have food, it works so well because it's got that nice acidity, it's got those juicy fruits. They really lift the actual dish themselves, as well as the dish helping to carry through those beautiful fruity nuances that you actually get in the wine itself. And I just think it's fantastic. It has a lovely, again, it's one of those wines that you can enjoy just sniffing the nose, because again, it's all about the fruit, it's all about those lovely berries. You get a little bit of, say, this, like I mentioned earlier, you had a floral side, a little maybe touch of herb going on in there as well. But it's a wonderful wine. It's got some nice focus to it. It's got that freshness, and it's just one of them Moorish wines to have. Along the palate, those fruits really do come out. You really do begin to taste them. And there's that lovely freshness that sweeps through, but the freshness doesn't clear away the actual flavours. It actually lifts them and brings them out even more. And I just think that's really enjoyable about this wine. So hopefully you've enjoyed this wine and with your dish as well. So finally, we're going to now move on to our final wine. It's a Tawny Port from Quinto de Portal. Quinto de Portal is a place I visited a number of years ago, and did a little bit of work in one of their vineyards. I got to see how their processes for port making happen, as well as how they make their still wines as well. They've got vineyards in the Douro Valley in Portugal, and they're just absolutely stunning to go and see. Now, before, in a previous wine and dine at home with Colin's Fine Food, we did have a Quinto de Portal Ruby Port. And the difference between a Ruby Port and a Tawny Port is the processes that they go through. They all initially start off with red grapes, which are quickly picked from the vineyard. And these are a blend of different Portuguese grape varieties. They're then quickly pressed, and it's sort of a quick but gentle pressing, because you don't want any of this harshness being released, like the harsh tannins or anything, into the actual finished wine. And this traditionally was done by feet, and sometimes in their top wines, this is still the process that is undertaken. But this winery is very state of the art, and it's got actually robotic feet that move along in the winery and gently press the grapes, but do enough to extract enough colour and flavours out of them. With a Ruby Port, after this process is done, they're put into large oak barrels that don't really impart much oak or anything else, and they're left in there to age for about 3 years. And when we're talking about age, it's not really putting anything extra in there, because it's all a Ruby Port is all about those lovely dark fruits. And what will happen is just before it's put into that barrel, the fermentation of a port, unlike this Tawny Port, they're called fortified wines. And what they mean by this is that you're making your red wine as a red wine. You've got it in the barrel, it's fermenting away, the yeast is converting the sugars into alcohol. But when it gets to about 6-7% alcohol, the winemaker pours into those tanks 77% proof spirit. And this brings the overall ABV up to 20% alcohol. And this also kills off the yeast. So the yeast stop converting the sugars into alcohol. So you're left with quite a lot of sugar still in the actual wine itself. So the finished product ends up being a wine that's full-bodied, around 20% alcohol, with quite a bit of sweetness in there. And the Ruby Ports are really lush. With a Tawny Port, you kind of, what the winemaker's doing is, yes, you get your grapes, you press them, you put them into ferment, you do the same process, where you get about 6-7% alcohol, you then fortify it with 77% proof spirit, but then you put it into barrel, and you also allow it to be exposed to oxygen. And over this time, this has been aged for 4 years in barrel, it's allowing to impart some of the woodiness of the barrel, but also some of the oxygen is getting in there. So it's converting the wine away from it being all about its fruit to more of a savoury nuances, where you get a nuttiness. You might even get a little bit of vanilla and caramel from the oak, but you'll also get things like dates, figs start to develop in there. But because it's still quite young, there will be some of that dark red fruit also in there as well. And as you can see, because it's made out of red grapes, and again, this is kind of, again, it's gone through like almost 2 different kinds of, not really fermentation, but it's had a fermentation, then the fermentation being stopped, and then alcohol added. So there's 2 processes, much like the wines we've had. We've had a sparkling wine that has 2 fermentations to make it sparkling. We've had the Beaujolais wine that's had 2 fermentations to make it all about the fruit. And now here we've had a wine with a fermentation, and then a fermentation that's been stopped by adding spirits to make it a sweet dessert wine. And it's done really well. And what you can see that it's turned tawny because it's been exposed to oxygen, but it's also still got the redness there. If you do put it to light, you will be able to see that there's still the redness there from red grapes. Now, when you give this a smell, the Tawny Port, the actual Ruby Port, it we're all about these lovely dark cherries, plums, cranberries that you'd be sort of smelling in there. Now, you're getting sort of an underline of that, but now we're getting, I would say we're getting some dried fruits. There's definitely maybe some raisins going on in there, but just a touch. There's a touch of caramel going on there, like sort of a little bit of burnt sugar. There's some nice It's just really lifted, appealing. Almost, it's like maybe nuttiness, like maybe a walnut essence coming in there as well. But it's got this nice. Almost when you smell it, you can smell. It's a weird thing because you can't smell sweetness, but you also your nose anticipates it because it can smell this real ripeness about the wine. And then so when I taste this wine, the sugar and the alcohol give it a really round body. The tannins there are really soft, and you've got this really pleasing textural, sensual feel around your mouth. It's fantastic. There's a slight warming that comes from the alcohol itself, but then you're getting the fruit, you're getting the dried fruits, you're getting the nuttiness, and they're all working to combine with each other. It's brilliant. And then there is this still enough acidity just to give this freshness that comes through it. So it isn't all sticky. It doesn't just stick to the insides of your mouth and your lips and you're like, it's all cloying. It's not, it just refreshes it out. And I just think this is the wine where of any of them, you've got to be careful now. So we have to be careful that we don't spoil a fantastic meal that we've had so far. And a meal that's made our hearts flutter with sheer delight. The quandary now is, do you share? This could be the making and breaking of some relationships. Only the strong shall survive, since it comes with an alluring temptation to steal it away and have it all by yourself. Oh, Mr. Darcy, it's getting rather hot in here, and I think on that note, I might leave you lovers to do whatever it is that lovers do. But just before I do disappear, I'm just going to have another swig of this because it's absolutely gorgeous. And this will work a real treat with your puds. Whatever pud you've chosen, this will work with it fantastically. I can assure you that. By itself, it's fantastic. And again, with tawny ports, you can have them a little bit chilled if you want to. Try it. It's something I only discovered recently, and I had one chilled, and I had it with a little bit of chocolate and caramel chocolate with a little bit of saltiness to it. Wow, blew my mind. Fantastic. So just one parting quote I've got here. I believe it's from Marilyn Monroe. I've adapted it, so I've adapted it a little bit to suit this evening. Right, so what Marilyn said is, a real lover is one who can thrill you by kissing your forehead or smiling into your eyes or just staring into space. And apparently the latter, I'm told, I'm pretty good at. So on that note, I would like to thank you all for yet another fabulous Wine and Dine at Home with Colin's Fine Food. If you have not already done so, then please stay in touch for more of our fabulous events, offers and new releases by signing to our newsletter at www.guestwines.com, and don't forget to check us out on social media. So on that note, I will say have a wonderful Valentine's, enjoy the rest of your evening, the rest of your wines and your lovely food, and cheers.